Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the chill of a medieval October evening, where the air tastes faintly of wood smoke and damp earth, and you can almost hear the crackle of frost forming on the edges of the fields just beyond the village. You stand there, yes, you, right on the uneven cobblestones, the last violet glow of daylight falling behind the timbered houses, while the first lanterns sway to life in the gathering dark. A cluster of villagers moves past you, bundled in rough wool, muttering about the watch and the eve, and you probably won't survive this night if you don't at least pretend like you know what they're talking about. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time below. You know I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk forward, letting your feet settle into the slowly developing rhythm of the village's nightfall. There's a cadence to medieval evenings, unhurried, but also strangely alert. It's not like your world where street lamps click on automatically and a quick phone check tells you what the weather will be. Here, people sense night coming almost like a creature, something that approaches with soft paws and a cold nose. And on this particular night, All Hallows' Eve, it's not just the darkness they're preparing for. It's everything the darkness might allow in. A woman passes you a glance, the kind that suggests she recognizes your lost, time-traveling confusion, but politely pretends otherwise. She pulls her shawl tighter and continues toward the churchyard, where a growing cluster of villagers stands around the first lantern pole. It's here, in this small simple ritual of Nightwatch, where the origins of something that eventually becomes Halloween begins to shimmer faintly. You probably assume Halloween started with plastic pumpkins and pop-up stores appearing in August, but no, long before candy bowls and skeleton onesies, people gathered to watch, to guard, to wait, to listen for things they hoped would stay quiet. You can feel that seriousness hanging in the air now, like mist that hasn't decided whether to rise or settle. The soundscape is simple: boots on stone, a dog barking in the distance, someone dragging a stool across the church porch. A cold wind slips around your ankles, and yes, this is the moment you realize medieval footwear is basically the equivalent of wearing cardboard on your feet. But you press on, following the lantern glow because the Nightwatch begins whether you're ready or not. The mainstream historical fact slips into the scene naturally. Across much of medieval Europe, All Hallows' Eve was indeed observed as a vigil night, where communities gathered for prayers, bell ringing, and protective rituals meant to guard the boundary between the living and the dead. Not every village did it the same, and some barely did it at all, but the cultural thread was there, this sense that October 31st was not just another night. It was a hinge, a threshold, a night where attention mattered. As you draw closer, you hear someone mutter that the spirits are thinner tonight, a superstition so common that even the local priest doesn't waste energy trying to fully suppress it. This is the quirky fringe tidbit for this section. Some villages believe the spirits of the restless dead walked the roads at night unless the living kept vigil, lighting pathways with lanterns or candles to guide or deter them. No one quite agrees which it was, guiding them kindly or keeping them out, but either way, someone has already lit a taper on a low stone wall nearby, just in case. Historians still argue whether this practice came more from Christian vigil customs or from older pre-Christian traditions of marking liminal nights. You can imagine scholars waving manuscripts at each other, all while you're just trying not to trip on a loose stone and become the village's newest ghost story. A bell rings, soft, slow, and slightly off-key, and everyone looks toward the church door. The priest emerges, holding a lantern with glass so dusty that the light inside resembles the glow of a tired firefly. He clears his throat, preparing to say something solemn, but the wind catches his cloak and flings it dramatically over his shoulder. You bite back a laugh. Even in medieval times, the universe likes to insert slapstick moments. As he begins praying, you notice the children perched along the steps. Some pretend to pray, eyes squeezed shut with exaggerated devotion. Others peek mischievously around adults' legs, staring into the dark and daring each other to imagine shapes moving. One little boy nudges another and whispers something about a spirit pig that once wandered the village lanes. No doubt one of those exaggerated local legends meant to entertain and terrify at the same time. You make a mental note that medieval childhood wasn't all chores and poverty. It also involved scaring your friends with barnyard animal ghosts. The prayers continue, low and steady, blending with the rustling of the trees. You shift your weight, feeling the cold seep through the soles of those tragic medieval shoes again. And then, because this night is about vigilance, someone hands you a small lantern. The handle is rough, the metal slightly warm from human touch, and suddenly you're part of the ritual whether you wanted to be or not. You stand there, lantern glowing faintly, trying to look competent. Around the 2 to 3 minute mark of this journey, yes, right about now, you pause inwardly, letting your mind soften just a little. And since this moment is often where people decide whether to vanish into sleep or stick around, I want to gently remind you, if this slow wander through the past makes you feel cozy, curious, or just pleasantly distracted from your day, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed, liked the video, and maybe even commented something simple, like where you're listening from, or what part of history lulls you to sleep the fastest. Your support truly keeps this channel going, and I'm honestly grateful for every single one of you who shows up for these dreamy, sleepy adventures. Now, with that said, let's drift back into the story. The crowd begins to move toward the edge of the village, the boundary line where cultivated land ends and the unknown begins. A wooden beam marks the spot, carved with faint symbols. No one talks about them directly, they've been there for generations, left over from some past moment no one fully recalls. Whether they're Christian, pagan, or simply decorative is unclear, and once again historians still argue whether these kinds of boundary carvings indicated folk beliefs or were just carpenter doodles. You lean closer, tracing your finger near a spiral that might represent eternity, or a snail. Hard to say. One man, broad-shouldered and dramatically serious, begins checking the path ahead. He carries a staff tipped with iron, more for show than battle, although no one will admit that. Another villager follows behind him carrying a bucket of smoldering charwood, the scent drifting up in lazy ribbons that sting your nose. They call this the first pass, walking the perimeter to ensure no mischief makers, wild animals, or wandering spirits, depending on who you ask, slip into the village unseen. You fall into step with the group, the lantern swinging gently beside your hip. As you walk, you listen to the older villagers exchanging murmured stories. Someone claims a cow once refused to cross the boundary line on All Hallows Eve, which they took as a sign of bad air. Someone else laughs softly and reminds them the cow was blind in one eye and easily confused. The debate fizzles into good-natured snickering, leaving you smiling in the half-dark. Another mainstream historical detail rises naturally here. Medieval communities often used nighttime vigils to strengthen social bonds. The nightwatch wasn't only spiritual, it was practical. People shared stories, maintained awareness of threats, and reinforced the idea that communal protection mattered. No one faced the dark alone, even if they were half joking about ghosts while doing it. And yet, despite all the seriousness, the night has small comforts. A woman hands you a piece of something warm wrapped in cloth, spiced bread, dense and slightly sticky. You bite into it, surprised by the sweetness. She tells you it's made with honey and a touch of good luck spice, which you suspect might be whatever happened to be left in her kitchen. Still, it warms you from the inside out. As the group circles back toward the village center, you notice the children are now half asleep, leaning against their parents or each other. The lanterns flicker in the wind, sending shadows dancing along the house walls. For a moment, everything seems suspended between worlds, the living gathered, the dead remembered, the night holding its breath. A dog trots in from the dark, making everyone jump slightly before laughing it off. The priest mutters something about tying the dog up next year. The dramatic man with the iron-tipped staff pretends he wasn't startled, clearing his throat loudly and straightening his posture. The final minutes of the watch's first half settle into stillness. You stand with the lantern, feeling strangely responsible for a place that isn't yours. The wool of your borrowed cloak scratches your neck. The night smells like smoke and cold earth. And for the first time, you understand why people gathered like this. Not to confront terror, but to face uncertainty together. To acknowledge the thinness of the boundary while standing firmly on their side of it. The bell rings again, softer now. The first portion of the night watch draws to a close, and the villagers begin drifting toward their homes or the church porch to warm themselves before the next stretch. But for you, the journey continues, without breaks, without fresh introductions, because the story doesn't stop here. It only deepens, stretching further into the layers of belief, fear, practicality, and tradition that shaped this curious ritual. You stay near the church porch for a moment, letting your fingers thaw beside a small brazier filled with glowing coals. The villagers cluster around it like sleepy moths, sighing as the heat seeps into their joints. A woman rubs her hands together, muttering that the cold always feels sharper on All Hallows' Eve, as if the wind itself remembers things no one talks about. You shift your lantern from one hand to the other, feeling the subtle tremor of fatigue starting at the edges of your awareness, because yes, it's still the middle of the night, and medieval people didn't exactly run on 8 hours of regulated sleep cycles. But the break doesn't last long. The night watch isn't a formal ceremony with scheduled intermissions. It's a communal rhythm, a long, quiet weaving of duty and superstition. The group stirs, gathering again, this time with a more practical purpose. You fall into step with them, realizing that what comes next is far less mysterious and far more ordinary. But that's the charm of it. Medieval life always blends the mystical with the mundane, the sacred with the slightly ridiculous. You trudge toward the village's inner lanes, the lantern casting a cone of gold across packed dirt. Here, the tasks of the night watch become clearer. A man with a frayed hood points out a wooden latch that's loose on a grain store. Another villager fetches a wedge of scrap wood from a nearby pile and jams it under the door frame. A woman checks a chicken coop latch, muttering that last year a fox used the Halloween dark as an excuse for a buffet. It's the first mainstream historical fact of this section. Many medieval night watches were practical community safety patrols, designed to prevent theft, fire, or animal attacks during the most vulnerable hours. They were less about hunting ghosts and more about making sure your neighbor's cow didn't wander off and become a wolf's midnight snack. But of course, because it's Halloween Eve, practical concerns come laced with ritual. An older man taps the wooden beam marking the property, whispering a short blessing over the livestock. You wonder if he's doing that for religious reasons or just habit, but he seems convinced it helps. And honestly, after watching him tap the beam 3 times in the exact same pattern, you feel a tiny part of you wanting to tap something too, just to avoid being the odd one out in this superstition-steeped environment. A chill wind sweeps through the houses, sliding between doorways like a cat that knows it isn't welcome but enjoys strolling in any way. You tug your cloak tighter and follow the watch toward the edge of the fields. The moon hangs low and pale, a thin quint of light that struggles against the thickening cloud cover. Your breath fogs in the air. As you walk, your footsteps sink slightly into the cold soil where rows of cabbage and fading barley stalks lie dormant. One of the villagers carries a long-handled rake, not for farming tonight, but apparently for sweeping away mischief. You raise an eyebrow, which earns you a shrug from the man next to you who explains, with absolute seriousness, that the rake has scared off at least one spiritly shape in his lifetime. You're pretty sure it was just his drunk cousin in a cloak, but you keep that thought to yourself. The quirky fringe tidbit for this section creeps into the conversation naturally. In certain rural communities, people believe that mischievous spirits, or even wandering fair folk, could tangle the last unharvested stalks of grain into patterns that foretold misfortune. So villagers occasionally inspected the fields during night watches to ensure the crops weren't showing unusual signs. You look around now, trying to imagine the crop whispering spirit leaving subtle prank signatures. All you see is a field that looks tired, like it's had a long year and simply wants winter to arrive so it can rest. But your companions take a moment to look anyway, their eyes scanning the rows for anything out of place. Meanwhile, the children who insisted on coming along have started to regret their life choices. One girl yawns so hard she nearly drops her candle. Her older brother catches it, gives her an annoyed look, then promptly yawns just as dramatically. Their mother herds them to the back of the group, shaking her head at the folly of youthful determination. As everyone clusters near a well at the village's center, the priest raises a small bronze bell. Its handle is carved with a pattern so worn you can barely make it out. He rings it once, twice, then a third time, the sound crisp and hollow in the cold air. And for a moment, everyone goes silent. Even the dog that's been trailing the group sits down obediently, ears perked. The priest's voice is softer now, the kind of voice someone uses when they're not entirely sure whether what they're doing is practical or symbolic. He mumbles a blessing over the well and the nearby houses. You stand quietly, feeling the air shift just slightly, as if the darkness around the village has paused its slow crawl inward. Historians still argue whether these well blessings had deep cultural significance or were simply local customs tacked onto church rituals to keep villagers feeling secure. Some say it was all about purity of water sources. Others claim it was a symbolic act meant to reinforce the idea that the community was spiritually guarded. Either way, you notice that everyone seems to breathe a little easier afterward. You continue along the path, and soon the watch shifts into another layer of duty, checking for fire hazards. In a medieval village, fire was one of the biggest fears. A single spark from a hearth, if left unattended, could turn an entire community into ash. So the villagers move from house to house, rousing sleepy families to ensure their embers are banked safely. You swear you hear one grumpy man mutter that this was not the arrangement when he agreed to get married and thus inherit the responsibility of being woken for safety checks. As you help inspect a couple of doors, yes, at this point they trust you with door-checking responsibilities, you start to develop a low-grade respect for medieval vigilance. Despite the superstitions swirling around the night, the tasks hold a practical backbone. You peek inside a small home to find a family huddled around a dying fire, a pot hanging above it, slowly cooling. They nod at the watch group, grateful but half asleep. A baby stirs, then settles again. It's moments like these that reveal how much of Nightwatch lore ties back to very real concerns: safety, community, survival. You continue down the narrow lane, lantern swinging beside you. A man points out a patch of disturbed dirt near a barn door. He bends to inspect it, and the villagers gather around. You lean in too, realizing it's just a stray dog's paw prints. But the man recounts a story about a mysterious creature once lurking near his barn on Halloween night, a creature with eyes shiny as coals and breath foul as the marsh. Judging by the smirk on the woman beside him, you suspect this is the medieval equivalent of telling campfire stories to impress your friends. Still, everyone listens with half belief, half amusement. As you trudge onward, your lantern dims slightly, and you raise it, checking the wick. A man, one of the more experienced watch members, nudges you and adjusts the wick with practiced fingers. "Keep it steady," he says, "or it'll sputter out just when you need it." You nod gratefully, secretly convinced he saved you from becoming a medieval cautionary tale. The watch then moves toward the communal grain barn, one of the most important places to secure, especially this close to winter. The door creaks open, and the priest, along with two villagers, perform a brief check inside. Everything appears in order, though someone insists the smell is slightly different this year. You politely pretend to sniff intelligently, even though the only thing you smell is old grain and damp wood, the perfume of medieval agricultural anxiety. The night deepens. The wind sharpens. The lantern's glow grows more precious. Around this point, yes, roughly where another 2 or 3 minutes of listening time would pass, I gently guide you to breathe just a little deeper. You're doing great staying with the slow flow of the story. And if you're enjoying this cozy wander through dim medieval lanes, I'd be truly grateful if you liked the video, subscribed, or even dropped a simple comment like "still awake, still watching the watch." Your engagement helps this sleepy little corner of YouTube keep thriving, and it really does mean a lot. Now, let's keep walking. You follow the group as they approach a modest stone bridge crossing a thin stream. The bridge creaks underfoot as if complaining about the extra midnight traffic. A villager pauses to check the stones, tapping one with the end of his staff. "Loose," he says. Another man kneels down and adjusts it, mumbling something about how the bridge always acts up on holy nights. You suspect he just wants an excuse to blame the supernatural for poor infrastructure maintenance. Beyond the bridge, a low fog curls over the ground, thin as breath. The lantern light scatters through it, making every movement look slightly mystical. One of the children gasps, pointing at nothing in particular. The adults roll their eyes in unison, a universal gesture across time. As you drift back toward the heart of the village, the cadence of the watch softens. People walk slower, conversations quiet down, and the children ride half asleep on their parents' hips. You catch a glimpse of your own reflection in a darkened window, lantern light dancing across your face, and you realize how strange yet soothing this experience is. Being part of something communal, something ancient, something that feels both useful and symbolic. A dog trots beside you again, brushing your leg. You pat its head, and it leans into your touch as if it's decided you're officially part of the night watch now. For a brief moment, you hear the rustle of branches behind a cottage. A few villagers stop, lanterns raised. The air tightens. Then a goat appears, chewing calmly, staring at everyone with bland indifference. The dramatic man with the iron-tipped staff scowls at it, muttering that he knew something was out there. The goat simply flicks its ear, unimpressed, and ambles away. As you near the church once more, the well blessing, the field inspection, the latch checks, all of it starts blending into a soothing rhythm, a kind of medieval ASMR you didn't know you needed. But beneath the tired smiles and lantern light, there's a shared understanding that this night, the night where boundaries thin and uncertainties sharpen, must be guarded, even if just symbolically. The bell rings again. Once, twice. A few villagers begin drifting home to snatch an hour or two of sleep. Others settle along the churchyard to keep the watch going. And you, still holding that slightly dented lantern, step closer to the group that remains, ready to follow them deeper into the meaning, the myths, and the mysteries of this ancient ritual. The night watch is only just beginning to reveal its layers. You remain near the churchyard, feeling the ground settle into a deeper hush as the last stragglers shuffle home. The lanterns glow softer now, their light flickering like tired eyelids. A few of the watch members adjust their cloaks, tightening belts, tying cords, preparing for the long stretch of night that still lies ahead. This is the point where the ritual slips from the practical into the symbolic, from watching for foxes and loose latches into the liminal realm of saints and spirits, where even the most rational villagers carry a thread of belief in their pockets like an old charmed stone. You step quietly into the next phase as the priest motions the group toward the churchyard gates. They creak open on iron hinges that look centuries older than the church itself. The cemetery is small, enclosed by a crooked stone wall, its graves marked with weather-worn crosses and simple markers that lean as if listening to the secrets of the earth. A faint mist curls between the stones like memory made visible. You inhale, catching the scent of damp soil mingled with candle wax, the blend of life, death, and ritual. This part of the night watch is quieter than the practical patrol. People move with a kind of gentle reverence, stepping between graves instead of around them, as though passing through a room full of sleeping family members. Someone whispers that the veil is thin tonight, not in a dramatic horror movie sense, but in a small, respectful way, like saying the wind feels different just before rain. A woman kneels beside a grave, placing a sprig of rosemary on the stone. She whispers a prayer for her father, who, she claims, always returns on this night to check the doors. You wonder whether she means that symbolically or literally, but either way, no one questions her offering. In medieval villages, the line between honoring the dead and believing they might stroll around to inspect household hinges is pleasantly blurry. This leads smoothly into your mainstream historical fact for the section. Medieval All Hallows' Eve was deeply tied to the remembrance of the dead. People prayed for souls in purgatory, left candles in graveyards to light their way, and believed their prayers might ease the burdens of departed loved ones. Even the church, which often discouraged superstition, supported the idea of vigils that kept memory alive. So, while no one here actually expects great-great-great-grandmother to climb out of the grave and comment on the cabbage harvest, the connection between living and dead feels tangible, like two hands pressed against opposite sides of thin linen. One of the watch members lifts a lantern, illuminating a carved stone tucked near an old elm tree. The carving is rough and ancient, older than Christianity in this region, if villagers are to be believed. It depicts a figure with a halo-like circle around the head, but the body is ambiguous. Could be a saint. Could be a spirit. Could be a bored stonecutter. Villagers call it the Watching One, and traditions say it guards the churchyard on nights like this. You lean in closer, tracing the air around it because touching sacred stones, even if you don't personally believe, is the medieval equivalent of poking a sleeping dragon. Historians still argue whether carvings like this represent syncretic blends of Christian saints and lingering pagan deities, or whether they were simply local artistic flourishes that acquired stories later on. You can almost imagine medieval masons raising eyebrows at future scholars while muttering, "I just carved what the patron asked for." The priest leads a short prayer beside a row of graves. His voice is soft, the kind of soft that uses sleepiness as a cushion rather than a weakness. The villagers bow their heads. You follow, even if you don't know the words, because the act feels grounding, like placing one foot on either side of history. Just beyond the churchyard wall, someone begins humming a tune. It's slow, minor, and oddly beautiful, carrying just enough haunting resonance that it sends a shiver down your spine. A man explains that it's an old local melody sung for those who died within the past year. Every village has its own version, sometimes whispered, sometimes sung aloud. Some say the tune comforts the wandering spirits, others insist it protects the living from them. You suspect the real truth lies somewhere between superstition and community bonding, as most medieval beliefs do. The group moves toward the back of the churchyard where a narrow gap in the stone wall leads into a small grove. The trees huddle tightly together, their branches interwoven like old hands clasped in solidarity. The lanterns cast trembling shadows across the trunks. This grove, you learn, is older than the church itself, once used for folk rites that the priest occasionally pretends not to know about. But on All Hallows' Eve, he tolerates the tradition of visiting the grove as part of the night watch, claiming that nature, too, is a creation of God, while conveniently ignoring the small carved runes still visible on the roots. A girl, no more than 10, plucks an acorn from the ground and slips it into her pocket. She tells you it's for luck. Her mother gives her a knowing look but says nothing, because honestly, who couldn't use a lucky acorn on a night where spirits might peek through the hedgerows? Deeper into the grove, an older villager stops beneath a massive yew tree. The branches arc above like cathedral ribs, heavy and dark. He kneels and places a thin wooden tablet at its base. You crouch to examine it. The tablet is covered in chalk symbols, swirls, crosses, and little stick-like runes. For the soul lost, he murmurs, as though that explains everything. You open your mouth to ask, but he stands and walks away before the question forms. A woman beside you notices your puzzled expression and clarifies. Some villagers believe that not all spirits find their way home on this night. So they leave small tablets for those who wander, guiding symbols meant to give the lost a nudge in the right direction. It's the quirky fringe tidbit for this section. The practice of leaving symbolic items for soul-lost wanderers is documented in some rural traditions, though not universally. Sometimes it's chalk tablets, sometimes breadcrumbs, sometimes single candles placed at crossroads. No one agrees on whether these traditions worked, but people kept doing them because comfort often comes from the act, not the outcome. The trees rustle as though whispering back, and you step lightly, feeling the ground softened by centuries of fallen leaves. Your lantern casts shifting halos across the undergrowth. The night grows colder. You wrap your cloak tighter, realizing just how long these villagers have been walking. And they will walk for hours still. Once the grove is visited and the chalk tablet placed, the group turns back toward the village, taking the long route that passes through the narrowest lane. The houses here lean so close that their eaves nearly touch, like they're quietly gossiping across the street. Shadows flicker across the timber frames, making them look crooked even when they're not. You tread carefully, there's an ankle-breaking rut waiting for the unsuspecting traveler, and yes, you almost fall into it. The woman behind you snorts a laugh. You pretend not to hear. Halfway down the lane, a faint tapping sound draws everyone's attention. A villager raises his lantern, illuminating a shivering figure perched on a doorstep. It's the same dog from earlier. The villagers relax, but someone still mumbles that animals sense spirits before humans do. You consider whether the dog spends every night sensing spirits or whether it's simply cold and hoping someone will adopt it. Probably the latter, but tonight the villagers happily accept the supernatural version. Your breath forms little clouds in the air as the group heads toward the village green. At its edge, a thin figure emerges from a cottage, carrying a basket covered with cloth. She approaches the watch, lifting the lid to reveal small round cakes, soul cakes, she calls them, baked that afternoon. She offers you one, and you accept. It's warm, slightly spiced, soft in the center. You savor it quietly. She says she bakes them each year for the souls who linger and the watchers who guide. It's a sweet gesture, and also a historically grounded one. Soul cakes were part of medieval All Hallows traditions, exchanged for prayers or given as offerings. You bite into the cake, warmth spreading through you, and feel briefly like the night is less sharp. Around this point, yes, about 2 to 3 minutes of listening time again, I gently guide you back to that calm, open place in your mind. And if all this slow wandering through saints, spirits, and soul cakes has you feeling cozy or soothed, I'd truly appreciate it if you liked the video, subscribed, or even commented something simple like "still watching from" your location. Your support keeps these long, sleepy histories alive, and it genuinely means the world. Now, take a breath and return with me into the quiet. The villagers now form a loose semicircle on the green. The priest begins reciting names, those who passed away in the last year. Each name is followed by a soft, rhythmic response from the group. You feel the weight of time settle over the scene. These aren't abstract spirits, they're grandparents, neighbors, friends, people whose absence still echoes in this tight-knit community. Then the murmurs shift into storytelling. Someone shares a sweet memory. Someone else recalls a funny mishap involving a pig that escaped during a harvest feast. Laughter bubbles through the quiet night, not loud, not disruptive, just warm enough to defy the cold. You find yourself smiling along, because even though you've never met these people, even though you technically don't belong to this world, the tenderness of memory transcends time. After the storytelling winds down, a small group wanders to the edge of the green where a stone cross stands crookedly. A candle has been placed at its base. The flame flickers weakly as a breeze nips it. A man shields it with his hand, muttering a quick prayer. You stand beside him, silently admitting you're impressed by how much care the villagers put into tending both the living and the dead on this night. Even if half the rituals are symbolic and the other half improvised, the emotion behind them feels real. The moon finally breaks through the clouds, throwing a pale sheen across the rooftops. The lanterns glow in response, like small stars brought down to earth. You step back into the rhythm of the watch, feeling the narrative of the village, its faith, its fears, its small joys, woven into the fabric of this ritual night. The section ends with the quiet understanding that saints and spirits walk side by side here, not literally, but in memory, ritual, and the soft vulnerability of communities facing the unknown together. And with the village green behind you, the road opens toward the next ripple of Halloween Nightwatch traditions. You trudge onward, leaving the glow of the village green behind, lanterns swaying gently at your side. The night grows denser here, and the shadows of the cottages stretch across the narrow lanes like long fingers. You notice the subtle shift in atmosphere. This is where the night watch starts blending with performance, with theater, with what some villagers privately call the mischievous work of All Hallows Eve. The practical patrols are over for now. The time for masks, mummers, and mild chaos begins. You probably won't survive this segment without laughing, wincing, or at least raising an eyebrow, but that's exactly the point. Costumes are everywhere, though subtle. A man wearing a rough linen hood tiptoes along the lane, carrying a lantern shaped like a pumpkin, not a store-bought one, mind you, but carved from real squash with a crooked smile. A few children mimic him, draping cloaks over themselves and painting charcoal lines across their faces. You realize quickly that everyone here is participating in a kind of improvisational masquerade, where identity is flexible and rules are largely social, not written. This is the mainstream historical fact for this section. Mumming and masquerade traditions were common in medieval Europe, especially around All Hallows' Eve. Villagers often dressed as saints, spirits, or animals, blurring lines between real and imaginary, sacred and profane. You follow a small group into a courtyard behind the inn. Here, someone has constructed a makeshift stage using barrels and planks. A young man with a painted mask dramatically narrates a tale about a wandering spirit that once tricked a baker into giving him all the bread in the village. His gestures are exaggerated, his cloak flapping in the breeze. A child laughs, and a dog barks, punctuating the performance. The comedic timing is impeccable, even if accidental. You can't help but smile. The quirky fringe tidbit: in some villages, mummers wore masks not just for performance but to hide their identities while playing tricks. Some tales suggest that on this night, pranksters could leave small offerings, steal apples, or rearrange household items, all while claiming supernatural protection. The local lore insists the masks allowed villagers to step outside their social roles. Imagine a baker pretending to be a wandering ghost or a child suddenly becoming the town crier. It's theater, mischief, and mild rebellion rolled into one. Historians still argue whether mumming started as a pagan ritual or as a later medieval invention for communal entertainment, though most agree it likely fused both. You watch a group of teenagers, faces streaked with soot, tiptoe toward a stack of hay bales, giggling with the thrill of minor rebellion. The hay crackles underfoot, one boy almost loses his balance, eliciting stifled laughter from the watching crowd. A woman passes a basket of apples, offering them as prizes for the best improvised performance. You accept one. The skin is waxy, slightly chilled, but the taste is crisp and sweet. The community's rhythm now feels like a dance, part ritual, part improvisation. You notice that even the adults lean into the spirit, briefly trading seriousness for whimsy. Someone whispers about the hag that walks between houses tonight, and children jump slightly, huddling closer to their parents. You wonder if the whisper was meant to scare or amuse, likely both. The night has become a liminal stage where ordinary and extraordinary intersect. The mask you can't see beneath your own face suddenly feels symbolic of your presence here. A man wearing a bear costume, actually, a rough brown cloak with fur stitched onto the shoulders, stumbles into a barrel, sending a loud thump echoing down the alley. The crowd bursts into laughter. Even the priest, standing nearby, shakes his head with a wry smile. This is the subtle charm of medieval mumming, chaos contained by laughter and social ritual. A teenage girl recites a short rhyme as she circles the stage. Trick and turn, spirits churn, shadows flicker where we learn. The words have no formal religious meaning but carry the cadence of centuries-old folk memory. You notice that everyone repeats it quietly as she passes, ritual embedded in repetition, familiar yet slightly enigmatic. The performance ends as the moon slips behind clouds again, leaving only the lanterns to punctuate the darkness. People gather closer, some sitting on benches, others leaning against walls, sharing whispered commentary on the performer's creativity. You realize the mumming isn't just entertainment, it's a communal way of practicing imagination, courage, and social cohesion. Even minor pranks, like a hidden bucket of water tipped on the unwary or a cowbell secretly hung on a fence, carry the thrill of bending rules safely. A man whispers to you that some villagers believe wearing a mask lets your soul briefly step outside its body, observing the world from another perspective. You nod thoughtfully, wondering if that explains the shyness or daring you feel in this half-lit courtyard. The fringe idea is compelling, even if unverifiable. By now, the Nightwatch has created a rhythm, practical vigilance, spiritual reflection, and social theater. Masks and mumming act as the connective tissue between these layers, making the night vivid and memorable. Even if you're a visitor, or a modern viewer imagining yourself here, you feel the pull of ancient communal imagination, of a culture that turns survival, memory, and belief into playful performance. Around the 2 to 3 minute mark in this part of the journey, I'll gently remind you that if you're enjoying this immersive wander through history, a simple click to like, subscribe, or comment about your favorite quirky medieval tradition helps keep these slow, sleepy explorations alive. Engagement here is small but meaningful, and it ensures we continue drifting together through these long-lost rituals. Back in the courtyard, the performances wind down, and villagers start moving towards smaller alleys, carrying lanterns and masks. The laughter softens to murmurs. You walk with them, feeling a deepened sense of connection to this night. Masks off or on, children and adults alike share in the same ancient thrill, the thrill of stepping into another role, if only for a night. A stray cat darts across the path, drawing a startled cry from a child. The adults laugh softly, nudging the child to follow the rhythm of the night rather than fear it. You take a breath and notice the air has shifted again, colder, quieter, heavier with anticipation. Beyond the courtyard lies the next layer of All Hallows' Eve Nightwatch, fire, bells, and the invisible boundaries that separate safety from the unknown. The courtyard empties slowly, lanterns swinging, shadows dancing, stories and mischief lingering in the corners like faint smoke. You pause for a moment, absorbing the echoes of laughter, the hum of whispered warnings, the gentle thrill of harmless chaos. The mask you've been carrying in your imagination feels almost tangible now, like it has a small weight against your forehead. And as you step toward the lane leading to the next stretch of the Nightwatch, you realize that the traditions of mumming and masquerade are more than performance, they're a bridge between the practical, the spiritual, and the playful. They remind everyone involved that on this night, rules bend, stories breathe, and community thrives in the liminal space between sunset and dawn. The lane stretches before you, narrow and lined with low stone walls. The wind snakes between them, carrying the scent of smoke and damp leaves, and you can almost hear the quiet hum of the village's heartbeat under the stillness. Lanterns swing beside you, and the faint clatter of distant church bells marks the passage of time. Now comes the part of the Nightwatch where the villagers turn to fire, bells, and boundary keeping, the tools that mark and protect the edges of their world. You probably won't survive the chill without holding your lantern close, but the reward is worth it, an intimate glimpse into the tangible rituals that shaped medieval All Hallows' Eve. The first thing you notice is the small bonfire set in a cleared patch near the village boundary. Flames lick at the cold night air, casting tall, trembling shadows across the cobblestones. Villagers huddle close, some warming hands, others offering prayers or muttering charms. Fire, of course, had practical uses, keeping predators at bay, illuminating the night, but here it also serves as a symbolic boundary. Mainstream historical fact, fire was commonly used in medieval night watches to mark protective perimeters, acting as both deterrent and ritual element. These bonfires were sometimes carried from household to household in processions, their glow signaling communal vigilance. You crouch slightly, observing how the flames reflect in the eyes of the watch members. Their faces look softer, more human, illuminated by flickering orange and gold. One man tosses a pinch of dried herbs into the fire, and the scent curls upward, earthy and sweet. A few villagers whisper that the smoke wards off wandering spirits, and you catch the smallest smile on the lips of a child peeking from behind a cloak. A fringe tidbit emerges as you watch the ritual. Some villages rang small handbells in conjunction with bonfires, believing the sound kept malevolent spirits at bay. The bells weren't only for auditory protection, they were thought to resonate with unseen energies, marking sacred space. The villagers around you strike the bells with careful rhythm, a steady counterpoint to the crackle of fire, creating a harmony that is both eerie and comforting. Historians still argue whether bell ringing in these contexts derived from Christian liturgical tradition or older pagan rites. The truth likely lies in a mix of both, overlapping and adapting over generations. You can feel the overlap in practice. A priest mutters a brief blessing over the flames while others add offerings of grain, bread, or even small trinkets, all with little ceremony but much intent. A gust of wind whips across the lane, and you hug your cloak closer. The lanterns bob in response, throwing shadows that twist and stretch across walls. One of the villagers, a broad-shouldered man wearing a hood patched with leather, steps forward to check the perimeter. He taps his iron-tipped staff against stones, muttering something under his breath. You follow him, noticing the way he stops at every threshold, ensuring that each entrance and exit is accounted for. This is as much about ritual as practicality. Boundaries matter in a world without locks, fences, or streetlights. The firelight dances on the faces of children now, some wide-eyed, some yawning, as they clutch small bells or lanterns. They participate with guidance, learning the rhythm of safety and superstition together. You notice how even the youngest villagers are incorporated, not as observers but as active participants, passing along a small candle, ringing a miniature bell, echoing the steps of adults with careful mimicry. It's a subtle lesson. The night watch isn't just a duty, it's training, socialization, and reassurance rolled into one long evening. You walk a bit further to the edge of the village where a small stream cuts across the path. Someone has laid a cordon of small torches along the banks. Each torch flickers independently, some struggling against the wind. Villagers whisper that the firelight creates an invisible barrier, marking the boundary between the safety of home and the liminal spaces beyond. You notice a cat slinking along the bank, pausing briefly to inspect the flames before vanishing into shadows, nature acknowledging, perhaps, the ritual boundaries. A few people pause to adjust the torches, ensuring the flames won't die prematurely. One elderly man mutters about how the flames sometimes seem to speak to those who listen closely, though you suspect he means the flickering shadows themselves. The fringe idea lingers in the air. Fire not only illuminates but communicates. Whether spirits respond or it's all perception is secondary. The act of lighting the flames binds the villagers together in focus, purpose, and attention. Nearby, a small bell tower chimes the hour softly. The sound rolls over rooftops, mingling with the crackling bonfires. Villagers pause mid-step, raising their eyes briefly. Mainstream historical note: bell ringing was a key part of medieval nightwatch rituals, signaling time, calling attention, and symbolically protecting the community from spiritual danger. Here, it's both functional and sacred. As you continue, the villagers begin tracing the outer edge of the fields, lanterns bobbing like a line of small stars. One woman stops to adjust a fence post, whispering a charm that supposedly keeps wandering spirits from slipping through. You glance at the post, noticing a small carved symbol, maybe an old pagan rune, maybe just decoration, but the intent is clear. Boundaries aren't merely physical, they are ritualized, layered, and reinforced through careful attention. The wind carries a low, melodic hum from somewhere behind a hedge. Villagers don't react. You realize it's a child imitating the tolling of a distant bell, training ear and hand to match ritual with imagination. The scene encapsulates the interplay of practical vigilance, spiritual reflection, and playful human creativity. As you reach the far edge of the village, the night grows colder. Lanterns sway, firelight bends, and shadows stretch long and restless. You can almost imagine the thin veil of the world here, the space where the living and the imagined might brush shoulders. Everyone pauses for a brief rest. The priest stands in the center of the group, raising his lantern. The flames and bells merge into a single rhythm, a heartbeat for the village. You inhale deeply, letting the smoke and night air fill your lungs. The ritual of boundaries, the fire, the bells, the careful marking of edges, feels alive. It is at once protective, symbolic, and socially cohesive. You notice how even a casual observer, a traveler like you, can sense the careful choreography that keeps the community anchored in both physical and spiritual safety. And as you follow the final lantern back toward the village square, you understand that this portion of the night watch isn't just a ceremony. It's a careful dance of light and sound, a tactile reassurance that order holds in the face of darkness. The threshold between safety and unknown is marked, respected, and ritualized in ways that feel intimate and timeless. By now, around the 2 to 3 minute mark in this segment, I gently encourage you, if this slow wander through medieval rituals is soothing, enlightening, or just pleasantly immersive, a click to like, subscribe, or comment about which part of Nightwatch fascinates you most keeps these explorations alive. Your small gestures help this channel continue sharing these sleepy historical journeys. With the village safely circled, fire lit, bells rung, and edges marked, the night watch slowly transitions once again, from physical safeguards to offerings, feasts, and liminal foods, the next layer of All Hallows' Eve traditions waiting just ahead. You follow the winding lane back toward the village center, the glow of lanterns flickering across cobblestones slick with autumn dew. The night has shifted yet again. Practical patrols, mumming, fire, and boundary marking have given way to something subtler: food, offerings, and the quiet anticipation of both the living and the remembered dead. Your stomach grumbles, and you realize it's been hours since you've eaten, though the brisk night keeps you moving and distracted. You probably won't survive this night without sampling something. Luckily, that's exactly what this next layer of ritual provides. A small group has gathered around the inn's back courtyard. A basket of warm, spiced cakes sits on a wooden table, and the aroma drifts through the night air like a promise. Villagers refer to them as soul cakes, and handing them out is both ritual and social glue. You reach for one, feeling the soft warmth in your fingers. Mainstream historical fact: soul cakes were a genuine medieval All Hallows tradition. People baked them as offerings for the dead, sometimes in exchange for prayers, sometimes as a symbolic gesture of connection. Eating one in the quiet of Nightwatch links the living to the past in ways that feel small but profound. Nearby, a boy with a small mask of a hare hops around, pretending to dodge spirits. His laughter is contagious, drawing a reluctant grin from a tired elder leaning against the post. Fringe tidbit: some rural communities believe that leaving treats outside or sharing food with night watchers could appease wandering spirits or mischievous fair folk. Bread, cakes, apples, sometimes even scraps of cheese, were strategically distributed to maintain favor with entities you couldn't see. You quietly slide a cake into your cloak pocket, half for warmth, half for symbolic insurance. Historians still argue whether these offerings were primarily spiritual, social, or both. Was the ritual about appeasing unseen forces, reinforcing community cohesion, or simply ensuring no one went hungry on a chilly autumn night? The truth probably rests in all three, layered like the dough of a soul cake itself. You bite into the treat, sweetness spreading slowly, and feel the soft warmth of the hearth in your chest, even though no fire burns inside you. As you chew thoughtfully, the priest gathers villagers near a small stone altar. Candles have been arranged carefully, their flames reflecting in the priest's eyes. He murmurs a prayer, and the villagers respond with a collective breath. Some offer a whisper of gratitude for the harvest, others for safe passage through the year. You notice that the ritual is equal parts reverence and reassurance. It's about marking the passage of time and acknowledging unseen forces, even if you personally doubt them. Across the courtyard, a woman lays small bundles of herbs beside the altar. Each bundle is tied with a thin cord, and she murmurs what sounds like protective blessings. Fringe idea: some traditions held that these herbs, rosemary, sage, or thyme, could strengthen the barrier between the living and wandering spirits. They were both practical and symbolic, used to scent the home, protect food, and anchor intention. You lean closer to catch the aroma, earthy, pungent, slightly sweet, calming in the deep night air. Children, meanwhile, run between adults, their cloaks trailing like shadows. One girl places a small candle on a gravestone outside the courtyard, whispering the name of a recently deceased cousin. She straightens, satisfied that she has honored them properly. The adult supervising her nods approvingly, but says nothing. The act itself is enough. Mainstream historical note: leaving candles on graves and in windows was a widespread custom intended to guide souls and illuminate their path home. You can feel the quiet, contemplative energy in the courtyard, a mixture of care, ritual, and gentle vigilance. A man explains, with barely concealed amusement, that some of the offerings, especially cakes and small trinkets, serve a dual purpose: honoring the dead and allowing children to practice generosity and ritual participation. The social and educational functions of Nightwatch are often overlooked by scholars but are palpable in moments like this. You notice that the children mirror the adults' movements, mimicking gestures, tone, and even quiet pauses. Learning ritual through imitation is subtle, effective, and endearing. You step closer to the altar, noting that the candles flicker in a minor breeze. The priest moves between them, adjusting a wick, murmuring another soft blessing. The air is thick with a mix of incense smoke, herbs, and candle wax. You inhale deeply, feeling the rhythm of centuries pressing softly against your senses. There's comfort here, in repetition, in light-piercing darkness, in ritualized attention. Even your modern self can feel the layering of time, community, and intent. A woman points to the cakes and explains that each one represents a soul, a connection, a hope that the departed are remembered. You bite again, sweetness filling the quiet night. Fringe anecdote: some villages believe that the more carefully the cakes were made, the more likely spirits would visit, and occasionally villagers would leave a slice outside as a literal invitation to the wandering dead. Whether this worked or not, it reinforced attentiveness, care, and community memory. As the night stretches, some villagers drift toward a nearby bridge, carrying candles and small cakes for the waterside spirits. You follow, the wooden planks creaking underfoot. The stream glows faintly under moonlight, and the sound of flowing water mixes with the occasional hum of prayer, laughter, or whispered charm. Mainstream historical fact: water features, streams, wells, ponds, often received offerings on All Hallows' Eve, intended to honor local spirits, purify, or protect communities from bad luck. You kneel beside the stream and watch the candles bob gently on the water. Each one seems to carry a wish, a prayer, or an act of remembrance. A child leans against your shoulder, whispering that the lights will guide the spirits safely home. You nod, quietly agreeing, if only to maintain the rhythm of this shared experience. The priest rings a small bell once, twice, and the sound carries over the water. You notice that even the faintest chime seems to reassure everyone, grounding the night watch in both sound and intent. Historians still argue whether the auditory component was more symbolic or practical. Either way, it creates a moment of pause, reflection, and unity. By now, around the 2 to 3 minute mark of this segment, I gently remind you, if you're enjoying this slow, immersive drift through medieval rituals, a like, subscription, or comment about your favorite ritual keeps these explorations alive. Your support, as subtle and comforting as the candlelight floating down the stream, allows us to continue weaving these sleepy, historical journeys together. You rise from the stream bank and follow the villagers back to the village square. Lanterns glow, cakes have been distributed, candles placed, and boundaries subtly reinforced. The night watch, through offerings, food, and gentle attention, has created a soft, living map of community, memory, and ritual. Even if you're just a visitor in imagination or time, the connection is tangible. The living care for the dead, the young learn attentiveness, and the night is held together by shared light, scent, sound, and intention. You follow the group out of the village square, the lingering scent of candles, herbs, and spiced cakes fading behind you, replaced by the crisp, damp air of the open fields. The lanterns bob like terrestrial stars, illuminating furrows of barley and patches of winter wheat that lie in muted shades of brown and gold. This is the part of the night watch where the boundary between the practical, the symbolic, and the mystical grows thinner, where the villagers venture into liminal spaces, marking thresholds, recounting stories, and performing subtle rituals to negotiate the unseen world. You probably won't survive this walk without feeling slightly goosebumped, yet strangely grounded, in the rhythm of centuries-old customs. The first stop is a low, ancient stone circle at the edge of the fields. It's nothing as grand as Stonehenge, but the worn stones stand firm against centuries of wind, rain, and harvests. The villagers approach quietly, speaking in hushed tones. You notice that even their footsteps seem slower here, as if the ground itself requires reverence. Mainstream historical fact, small stone circles and megaliths were often incorporated into medieval All Hallows' Eve practices, repurposed from older pagan rituals and blended into the Christianized calendar. Communities used them as focal points for protection, blessings, or small-scale divination. A man places a small bundle of straw at the base of one of the stones. Another whispers a short rhyme, barely audible over the wind. Fringe tidbit: some villagers believed that spirits were drawn to stone markers and that leaving offerings, straw, cakes, or coins, helped spirits find their proper resting place or guided lost souls safely to the afterlife. You crouch to watch, noticing the careful choreography. The bundle is tied just so, the rhyme recited precisely, the gestures deliberate but subtle. Historians still argue whether these stone-centered rituals were consciously pagan survivals or imaginative reinterpretations by Christian communities. Either way, the intent is clear: to protect, honor, and reinforce communal bonds through ritualized action. You notice how even a seemingly mundane gesture, a tied bundle of straw, feels heavy with meaning under the moonlight. The group moves on, following a narrow track that cuts between hedgerows, lanterns casting long shadows across the frost-kissed grass. A child pauses to point at a twisted root, claiming it looks like a crouching imp. An adult nudges the child along with a chuckle, But you catch the child's serious gaze. The imagination here is as much ritual as any chant or prayer. This is precisely the blending of practical, social, and mystical functions of medieval nightwatch. As you reach a crossroads, the priest pauses. He pulls a small knife from his belt and carves a simple cross into the earth, just at the center where paths intersect. Mainstream historical note: marking crossroads with symbols or small fires was a common practice, intended to protect travelers and communities from mischievous spirits, especially on nights when the veil between worlds was thought to be thin. A fringe tradition emerges here, whispered by a woman nearby. Some believe that spirits lingered at crossroads longer than elsewhere, drawn to intersections as liminal spaces. Leaving offerings, carving symbols, or even just walking carefully could guide or appease them. You imagine the night thick with invisible attention, the fields buzzing with silent watchers. The wind picks up, and the lanterns swing more violently, casting fleeting shadows that seem alive. You hug your cloak tighter, grateful for its warmth. A man beside you taps a staff against the ground rhythmically, explaining that the sound anchors the living. You can't decide whether he's serious, playful, or both, but in the rhythm of this ancient night watch, it works. Soon the group arrives at a small grove of ash trees, branches arching overhead like the ribs of a great cathedral. The priest leads a soft chant, barely above a whisper, while villagers place small candles among the roots. Fringe tidbit: some medieval communities believed certain trees were conduits to the spirit world, particularly on All Hallows' Eve. The ash, yew, and hawthorn were thought to mark entrances, exits, and resting places for wandering souls. You inhale the earthy scent of leaves and smoke, feeling the grove's quiet power. A young girl, holding her lantern close, offers a handful of seeds to the base of one tree. For the birds, for the spirits, she whispers. You notice that her action, small as it seems, resonates with the night's rhythm, care, remembrance, and subtle negotiation with the unseen. Mainstream historical fact: children were often active participants in nightwatch rituals, reinforcing continuity, social values, and the delicate balance of belief and imagination. The priest raises a bell and chimes once, twice, then thrice. Each peal reverberates across the grove, and the villagers bow slightly. Historians still argue whether bell ringing served primarily to ward off evil, summon protection, or simply provide a shared temporal rhythm. Whatever the answer, the effect is undeniable. The night feels both sacred and secure, ordered by shared intent and repeated action. As you move from the grove back toward the village, lanterns swinging in unison, the air feels electric with shared attention. Stories of spirits, saints, lost travelers, and mischievous fair folk blend seamlessly with practical vigilance and communal care. The line between superstition and social cohesion, between magic and routine, has become beautifully blurry. Children skip beside you, carrying the last of the candles to a small stream that borders the village. Adults follow more deliberately, setting down small tokens, cakes, herbs, coins. Fringe detail: some accounts suggest these minor offerings encouraged spirits to linger briefly and then move along, preventing them from troubling the living overnight. You quietly watch, noticing how every gesture, every flame, every whispered word, maintains the rhythm of the night. A sudden rustle in the hedge draws your attention. The villagers pause, lanterns raised. You hold your breath. A fox darts across the path, ears flicking, eyes bright in the lantern glow. A collective sigh of relief echoes, half amusement, half recognition. The real and imagined hazards of the night exist side by side. As the group approaches the village again, lanterns casting gentle, flickering light over familiar rooftops, you feel a profound sense of continuity. The Nightwatch has guided you through practical vigilance, masquerade, fire, offerings, and liminal spaces, all while threading in memory, imagination, and communal care. The rhythm, once unfamiliar, has become familiar, even comforting. And around the 2 to 3 minute mark of this segment, I'll gently remind you that if this immersive stroll through medieval liminal spaces has captivated you, a like, subscription, or comment about the ritual you found most enchanting helps keep these sleepy historical explorations alive. Your participation, however small, matters. The lane widens again, leading to the village square where the Nightwatch will gradually draw to a quieter phase. Shadows and lanterns mingle, stories have been shared, prayers murmured, and offerings placed. You walk with a newfound understanding. These rituals were as much about connection between living, dead, and community as about superstition. And as you step toward the center, you feel that sense of shared vigilance and imaginative freedom that makes medieval All Hallows Eve Nightwatch feel timeless. The village square spreads out before you like a patchwork of shadows and flickering light. Lanterns hang from every post and doorway, their flames wavering gently, casting warm golden pools on the cobblestones. The air carries the faint aroma of smoked herbs, candle wax, and the last remnants of spiced cakes. This is the culmination of the Nightwatch, the quiet, reflective stage where all the previous layers converge: practical vigilance, masquerade, fire rituals, offerings, and liminal journeys through fields and groves. You probably won't survive the subtle emotional weight of this moment without pausing, breathing, and feeling the centuries of intention pressing softly against the night. The priest stands at the center, holding a lantern aloft. Around him, villagers settle in small clusters, some kneeling, some seated on benches, others leaning against walls. The atmosphere is intimate and almost reverential. Mainstream historical fact: in many medieval European villages, the final stage of All Hallows Eve Nightwatch involved collective reflection, prayer, and offering. It was a moment to consolidate the work of the night, ensuring both protection and remembrance were complete before dawn. Children cluster around the edges, whispering stories of spirits seen in shadows, imitating the adults' movements, learning the rhythms of participation. Fringe tidbit: in certain regions, children were encouraged to speak to the spirits in playful riddles, believed to appease or amuse wandering souls. You listen quietly, smiling at their earnestness, the words floating like tiny, ephemeral bridges between generations. Historians still argue whether these child-led rituals were protective, pedagogical, or simply playful folklore. The consensus is that they functioned as all three, blending social cohesion, imagination, and spiritual attention. You notice that even the adults pay close attention to the stories, nodding, chuckling softly, or adjusting a lantern with care. The night is alive with the energy of shared ritual, even as it leans toward quiet reflection. A woman places a small candle on a bench, whispering a prayer for her family. The light flickers gently, dancing on her face. You feel the same pull she does, the urge to connect, to honor, to witness. This is the core of the Nightwatch: attentiveness, continuity, and respect for the fragile balance between life and memory. A man explains that many of the symbols used throughout the night, candles, herbs, cakes, bells, carved stones, carry multiple layers of meaning. Some are protective, some commemorative, some performative, and some simply comforting. The beauty of the Nightwatch is that all these layers coexist. Fringe detail: in some villages, if a candle burned too low or a cake went uneaten, it was believed a spirit might linger longer than intended, or mischief might follow into the household. The rules are subtle, the consequences whispered. but the attention paid is genuine. You notice a faint murmur growing among the villagers. One by one, they recite names of the recently departed. The cadence is slow, soft, almost musical in its repetition. Mainstream historical fact: naming the dead aloud was a common medieval practice, especially on All Hallows' Eve, to honor souls and help guide them safely through liminal time. You lean in, imagining each name as a thread connecting the living to the departed, a human chain stretching back through centuries. A stray breeze lifts a fallen leaf, sending it twirling across the square. Children chase it, laughter spilling lightly, mingling with the soft intonation of prayer. You notice how seamlessly play and reverence coexist here, a hallmark of Nightwatch traditions. Even the most minor gestures, the flick of a hand, a whispered joke, a bow, serve to reinforce community bonds and provide reassurance against the unseen. The priest raises a bell once more. The chime rings clear, cutting softly through the night. The villagers pause, heads bowed, hearts aligned with the gentle vibration. Historians still argue whether such auditory markers were primarily spiritual, psychological, or practical, but tonight, you feel their cumulative effect: focus, cohesion, and closure. Children pass small lanterns to adults, adults to children. Cakes are shared, candles repositioned, and the last offerings collected or left carefully in place. The night has been long, layered, and demanding in its attention, yet gentle in its rhythm. You breathe slowly, noticing how your own heartbeat seems to match the subtle cadence of the night watch, attentive, patient, present. You look around at the lanterns swaying, shadows stretching, faces lit softly, and feel a quiet wonder. Everything has converged: practical vigilance, masquerade, fire, offerings, liminal journeys, child-led rituals, prayers, and remembrance. The village square is alive, yet at peace, a living testament to centuries of careful, intentional tradition. Around the 2 to 3 minute mark of this final segment, I invite you once more, if this journey through Medieval Halloween Nightwatch has soothed, fascinated, or gently delighted you, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment about the part that captured you most. Your engagement ensures these slow, sleepy histories continue, connecting past and present in quiet, reflective ways. The lanterns begin to dim, some extinguished, others softly reduced to glowing embers. The villagers stretch, yawn, and prepare to return home. You follow, savoring the layered textures of the night, the faint echo of bells, the lingering scent of herbs, the soft warmth of shared cakes, the comfort of communal attention. Even as the night watch closes, its rhythms and rituals imprint themselves gently on memory. And as you step back toward your imagined modern self, carrying fragments of firelight, song, and prayer with you, you realize the night watch was never just a duty, it was a living choreography of care, remembrance, and community. The unseen world may have been part of the story, or simply the imagination of watchful humans, but the feeling, the attentiveness, the rhythm, the gentle vigilance, is undeniably real. The night eases slowly around you now, as if the village itself is exhaling after hours of careful vigilance. Lanterns hang dimly, the last embers of the bonfires flicker weakly, and the distant church bells toll in soft cadence, marking the passage of time more gently than before. You breathe in deeply, feeling the cool air fill your lungs, carrying the subtle, earthy scent of fallen leaves and the faint smoke of spent candles. Everything feels muted, softened, and tender, the way a memory settles into the corners of your mind. You notice the gentle rhythm of footsteps fading, the low murmur of voices tapering, leaving only the whisper of wind through trees, the occasional rustle of a stray animal, and the delicate crackle of dying embers. It's a kind of music, slow and meditative, weaving together all the moments you've just witnessed: patrols and lanterns, mummers and masks, bonfires and boundary markers, offerings and prayers, children's laughter, and the quiet weight of remembered souls. Every detail lingers in your imagination, warm and reassuring, like a soft blanket wrapped around centuries of shared human care. Take a moment to feel how the Night Watch taught its participants attentiveness, patience, and reflection. The villagers moved through darkness with purpose, honor, and gentle mischief, connecting themselves to the living, the dead, and the traditions that bound them together. You can carry that feeling with you now, this attentive rhythm, this quiet reverence, this playful curiosity, into your own evening, letting it anchor you in comfort, presence, and calm. If you've enjoyed this slow drift through history, let yourself pause and consider supporting the channel with a like, a subscription, or even a small comment about what moment of the Night Watch resonated most with you. Your engagement is subtle, but it helps keep these soothing, immersive histories alive and encourages more explorations like this. It's a small gesture, yet meaningful, a continuation of attention across time and space, from medieval villages to your own quiet room. Now, feel your body soften, your muscles release, and your mind float gently on the memory of flickering lanterns, distant bells, and quiet conversations with the departed. Let your thoughts drift like smoke curling into the sky, unhurried, unbroken, and calm. The Night Watch is over, but its gentle cadence remains, leaving a warm, sleepy echo that follows you even as you close your eyes. And as the last ember fades, the village sleeps, the wind whispers softly through the trees, and you, too, can let the quiet settle. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let yourself drift gently into sleep, carrying with you the rhythm of centuries, the comfort of community, and the hush of a world that moves slowly, deliberately, and with care.